Hello, everyone, on this Wednesday, July 8th. This is the third episode of the Deep Water MMA Podcast. I'm your host, Connor Northrup, and I'm joined by my partner in France, Lucas Grandsire. What's up, Lucas?
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Thank you for watching. Episode 3, we're chugging along. Things are moving. It's good to hear.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of surprising. I was actually thinking about this too, just going over the show notes and everything. We've been doing this 3 weeks now. It just seems like it's gone by pretty fast.
Well, yeah, doing it once a week, I mean, it starts to move fast, and before you know it, it's like, shit, it's Wednesday again. We got to make sure everything's in order. So, yeah, it's got to keep chugging along.
Yeah, for sure. And it was kind of crazy, too, because, you think about it, we had 5 straight weeks of UFC events. This weekend, we finally kind of, I don't know, it was a nice refresher. I think Mike Heck kind of said it last week. He was kind of looking forward to it. How was your weekend? How was your, week off of UFC?
Well, it was good. Well, I was in the process of finishing up everything for college. I had a big presentation, so it was good to focus on that. And now that it's over, I got Fight Island. I got everything waiting for me MMA-wise. So it was a good break. It was needed for me, right on schedule. And now we get to go back into everything now that I'm ready to go.
Yeah. All right. Are you graduating now? Are you done with all your coursework and everything?
Yeah, yesterday was I had to send in a written report, I think 40 pages, then I had to present it to the teacher, and then I was like, are we all good? She said, you're good. So that's it. That's official word. All we're waiting for is the diploma. So it's pretty crazy to say.
Wow, congratulations.
That's right. You guys get the exclusive scoop right here on the podcast, so you should watch for sure.
And, obviously we had a weekend off, yes, but, I mean, I feel like this weekend almost feels like the first, normal, I want to be careful with this just so people don't get mad, but, almost normal pandemic-free MMA weekend, I think is, the best way to describe it. You have LFA, you have KSW 53 also on Saturday. LFA 84 is on Friday, but then you have the UFC event, obviously a big one that a lot of people are anticipating. It's we got 3 events, and it's to me, it's just not just UFC. It just seems like we're getting something normality, I guess, happening in our lives of MMA.
Yeah, no, it feels good. Things are getting back to normal. Even from our perspective, covering it, it's we get to move away from UFC a little bit. So it's exciting seeing things go back. We're just waiting on Bellator, though. I don't know what they're doing. They're, putting on these past events they're showing us on YouTube. But you got to give us something at some point, man. Bellator is big, but if you stay away for too long, that's going to hurt them in the long run.
Yeah, that's something that I was just thinking about a couple of days ago too. Is just when will they make their way back? Because you got to feel like they're losing opportunities right now.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm ready to cover Bellator again. I got a bunch of guys I'm looking at, like Costello Van Steenis that I know will be back soon. And it's all right, I'd like to do some interviews, but you guys got to wake up, got to give us some content.
Yeah, because especially if you look at the UFC too, obviously UFC is the leading promotion in MMA, but just seeing them on this platform lately, though, has been kind of surreal just because it's everyone, I think, had an idea of what the UFC was, but just think about how many more eyes have been seeing it lately because you don't they don't have the NBA right now. I mean, NFL would be out of season anyway, but NHL playoffs would have been right around that time where all this was going on. So it's those are, and in baseball as well, those are 3 huge sports that would have been going on that, they would have been competing with, and these are eyes. So you think Bellator and those promotions too, but we got to get on this. Yeah, you're still competing with the UFC, but I think you'd still probably get eyes that maybe you weren't getting before this.
Yeah, exactly. And now's the time too. If you get this big highlight reel KO or something, people are going to see it. I mean, these sports websites ESPN, the score, all that stuff, they're looking for these moments. They're looking for the viral videos to post up. People are getting mad at them for talking about LeBron James all day and finding these kind of shitty stats. But, now's the time to give them some kind of content aside from, past stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And just talk about previous weeks too. I mean, we had James Litch we started off with, Mike Heck last week. I mean, 2 great guests. We have another great one this week, Michael Stets of WJR, formerly MMA on Sirius XM Fight Nation. Unfortunately, the schedules didn't align this week, so Lucas and I are recording, and then I will add my conversation with Michael and our debate as well. We got into a lot of things, including broadcast career, Abu Dhabi, because he has some experience covering Abu Dhabi and then with Fight Island. And then also just how the MMA radio and podcast kind of scene has evolved, that on-air brand. Also, Michael and I debated UFC 251, specifically Jorge Masvidal, Gilbert Burns. I mean, we didn't even touch on that. That's how this is a busy week. We didn't even touch about some of the biggest stories yet. And also a lot of these COVID-19 tests too, because I know Lucas and I were kind of talking about this on Monday on how there was kind of like an increase of tests. And then just, recently, Pedro Munoz was another one that kind of came up too. So it's happening, a lot of stuff. And just to give you guys a rundown of today's show, I'm going to talk to Michael Stets, followed by a little debate. And then Lucas and I are also going to preview Fight Island, talk a little bit about LFA 84, and get on with the week. What a big week. I'm okay. What a big weekend it will be. Tongue twister there. And, I'm super excited for it.
Yeah, it's unfortunate I won't be able to talk to Michael. Just putting it out there. We're not beefing. I'm not, doing this thing. Like, if Michael's going to come on the show, I'm not coming. Unfortunately, I can't make it happen. But I am interested to hear what he has to say, of course. He has that radio background. A lot of things I'm interested in myself, like the radio and stuff. So I'm sure I'm counting on Michael to come in the show and giving us some good stuff for sure.
Yeah. And, I think I speak for both of us, too. One thing I think we've kind of every week since we've done this show is, we don't want to just, talk to the same guys all the time either. We do want to get different platforms. And like Lucas just said, he does have more of a radio kind of background. Mike Heck had a little bit of a radio background, but this is a guy that was on MMA Sirius, Fight Nation. So it's going to be interesting to see that, too. And also a guy who's now covering Detroit Lions. I just find that interesting, too. I'm a Giants fan, but still, to kind of have that platform, and you can still see he's very passionate about MMA. So excited to talk to Michael. So we'll go right into that. Here's my talk and debate with Michael Stets. I'm now joined with this week's guest, a veteran broadcaster, currently works at WJR 760 AM and was formerly on MMA on Sirius XM Fight Nation. Michael Stets. What's up, Michael?
What's up, Connor? Thanks for having me on, brother.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Not much going on these days. I'm looking for things to do.
Yeah, I always say that.
I'm not hard to find.
Yeah, I always say, if this thing gave me anything, this pandemic, it's time.
Well, it's great for broadcasters like yourself, the freedom of being home and getting a hold of anybody at any time. I think it might really change the game, so to speak, guys getting interviews. There's a lot of people that are around at home that you can talk to now. So it's encouraging to see guys that are out there trying to get interviews, and now there's a lot more access because a lot of celebrities, a lot of fighters, athletes are all home. So.
Yeah, because we talked to James Lynch the first week and then Mike Heck last week, and they both said the same thing. They're not much has really changed, the daily regimen, because most of it is remote. So they're we haven't really done that. We're not traveling to events, obviously, but there's only been one show in town as far as recently, but yeah. But
indeed.
Yeah. And one of the reasons why we want to do this show too is just to bring guys on yourself, that people who cover the sport, we want to feature that more. Me and Lucas, we're both running for Miami News now, so we talk to fighters a lot during the week. So we're we kind of wanted to change it up, do something a little different. And I know with you, that's why I want to bring you on, was just because I know you have kind of a radio background. You can bring some insight that maybe we haven't heard yet. And I remember you back in 2012 too. That was why you kind of came out. I remember covering a show with you in Atlantic City. I still feel like it was that Chad Dawson Bernard Hopkins fight. I know you say you didn't cover that, but
it wasn't there. I would have loved to have covered B-Hop fight for it, but yeah, I used to go down to Atlantic City for the Bellator shows when I was living in New York, because I'm in Michigan now. But yeah, I covered a lot on the old Caesar's Palace shows. It was 1,200 people or whatever in the ballroom there, Boardwalk Hall. There's a lot of fun Bellator cards back then.
Yeah, I remember one that stands out is that I think it was Makovsky Dantas. I think that was the ballroom of the Boardwalk Hall.
Smoked poor Zach, yeah.
Yeah.
Zach's a good dude though.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think he's in the upcoming Brave tournament, I think too. I saw Sean Santella who.
Right on. I didn't know that. Shorty too, huh? Wow.
Yeah, so that should be pretty good.
Good for them.
Yeah. And fast forward from covering those, back in the day, the Bellator events. I think it was when Bjorn was still running it. There's a lot of stuff happening now, during the pandemic. The first of this Fight Island concept now, and first of 4 events. And I wanted to talk to you because I know you covered, you have been to Abu Dhabi for the Abu Dhabi Warriors and stuff like that too. What was kind of your first reaction to kind of hearing about this Fight Island concept, especially when it was in Abu Dhabi?
When I first heard it, that was when they were trying to get that event going on in California, basically illegally on the Indian. So I was very outspoken. I'm sure if you saw my Twitter, I did not want them to put that event on. I felt it was very dangerous for all that was involved, whether it be the fighters, the people behind the scenes. You wanted a protocol in place, and there was no protocol. Now there is. So that really bothered me then. And then the Fight Island thing, I just was struggling to, and everyone's jokes about it and the pictures and the memes and what it was going to look like, whether it was going to be from, some crazy James Bond movie kind of thing. Yeah, you had no idea. I mean, UFC has money, but you didn't know exactly where is this island going to be? And then when they said Yas Island, I was like, oh, that makes sense, because they've had Middle Eastern investors for a long time now. They had, it doesn't look like a huge. I saw the media guide and some of the maps they've shown and stuff, and it looks like a lot of that was already in place already. I don't know how true that is, because I didn't do too much digging on it. I was just kind of, spinning through it. But what I will say now that we're here, not back then, I am kind of excited to see what it looks like, because I've complained about this forever. I feel like every UFC broadcast is so boring, Connor. It's always the same looking octagon, the same cameras, the same lighting. The Apex shows to me are almost unwatchable. Regardless of crowd, it's just like, can you jazz up the production? Can you give me something as a consumer? Something. So now that we'll see the octagon outside with palm trees in the distance, and so that would be intriguing to me. I just feel like it's become so stale that even whatever city they're in, you don't know, because it's the same camera angles. They might as well be in a TV studio, aside from some B-roll that they throw in from where they are when John Anik's going through some of the sponsor reads and stuff. You know what I mean? It's just, to me, like, it's just become very, very stale production-wise. And I'd like to see something new that would give me some energy and excitement watching on fight night, aside from the fights themselves. So, like, I remember, like, UFC 200, they changed the canvas to, like, yellow. And I was like, oh, cool, look at this. I mean, it's little things like that make me excited.
Yeah, because, like, if you think about it too, like, this would be the perfect time to do that too, because it's already like something, like, it'd be cool if they almost had like I'm just like thinking here, but like if they somehow like had like almost like an island like in the octagon, like obviously like painted and stuff like that, but like palm trees and stuff, like, that'd be kind of cool if they had it, like, even if it was just like almost like shadowing of like a palm tree and stuff, like. Hey, I mean, it's something that would catch your eye, something different.
Creativity and some imagination, which the UFC has been bereft of for well over a decade now.
Yeah. It's funny you do mention that too, though, because I know their most recent broadcast too, the Poirier Hooker fight. I know Anik like kind of received a lot of positive feedback for like his commentary of it, especially like the post-fight interviews too, where really a lot of the times he was just kind of like almost just taking pauses and just listening a little longer.
Yeah, listen, the interviewing is a skill. It's a refined skill, and it's a skill that you have to continue to build on. And he's done a great job, especially with athletes getting emotional, giving someone their time to let their emotions go, not jumping in so they lose a thought. And that's a very tough thing at times to traverse. And I thought Anik handled it with aplomb, especially last week. And remember, it's not typical for the play-by-play guy to get in there to do interviews. That's usually goes to the analyst. Rogan, Cormier, but they've been giving it to Anik now. So that's even more duties on top of calling a play-by-play for however many hours in a row. So he's getting more onto his plate. But he's done an incredible job.
Yeah. As far as like content too, with like the sport of MMA too, and just from a more of a, I guess like a broadcast background, more on-air format too, like what kind of changes have you seen? Because now there's, obviously more podcasts than there's ever been. Radio as well, like, what have you seen kind of change in that format over the years?
I've seen it's grown in some ways and not in others. I think you've seen there are a lot of talented people that cover the sport, but there's a lot of stuff that waters it down. I still think there's too much like fanny kind of stuff that goes on, and not enough like objectivity. There's certainly could be more adversarial coverage. I find like a lot of times you get this overall vibe where it's almost like the coverage is like, hey, isn't MMA cool? Instead of like, just just get into the stories. People were worried about no fights and no fight night coverage, and I'm like, well, let's be creative, people. Go talk to fighters, interview them, and hear what they're saying, and write a story, write something creative. There's too much of this. So and so said this on Instagram, and listen, I understand that's how the sausage is made because all the clicks. I mean, I get it, but that's why The Athletic was so refreshing to me, because you had a fantastic A+ team doing real extensive stories, because a lot of all these fans today too, like it's twofold. You have to educate the fan base with feature stories and giving them that kind of thing, or different topics or different investigative stuff, going into deep dives, whether it be the money, like Nash from Bloody Elbows did a tremendous job on the economics of the UFC and stuff. But now the average fan will probably think that's boring. They want to see so-and-so called so-and-so, insert insult here, and this was on his Instagram. You know what I mean? Like, there's just too much garbage, and the stuff that should be valued, at least to me, because listen, I grew up, my mom got me a Sports Illustrated subscription when I was like 7. Like, feature stories on an athlete to me was, I love to learn about people. And I feel there's not enough learning about people. And I think there needs to be more lengthy features and stuff. But the heads of the websites want to control it because they want that click garbage, because they know people are going to see Conor McGregor said this, boom, and there's a zillion clicks, and it's like pinball. And then some fans, when I was writing at MMA Mania, they would say stuff in the comments like, "Oh, wish I could just see the quotes. Why do I have to go through a whole story?" And I'm like, and I would say stuff like, maybe try a coloring book. Maybe that's more suitable for your intelligence level. You know what I mean? Yeah. I just think there's a lot of good. I love that. I was a part of Sirius XM for 4 years, and to see how that station has grown, I'm sad to not be a part of it. But like Luke Thomas's show, MMA Tonight with RJ Clifford and Ryan McKinnell, and they've added Anthony Smith, and they have others who are on that channel. But that's great stuff, man. Busted Open too, if you're a pro wrestling fan, that show's the biggest show on the channel. I love that kind of content. I love getting because I'm I grew up New York sports radio. I mean, WFAN is king. So to have the Fight Game take on that format, to me was great. I don't think Sirius XM Fight Nation gets the credit and respect that it deserves, because that's a whole station devoted to talk radio for just fights. And it's boxing too. They have the great boxing coverage too with Jerry Cooney and his name's escaping me, Randy Orton. So they have a great Randy Gordon, I think. Yeah.
I was saying Orton.
Randy Orton is the RKO. Yeah, getting a little old, a little senile. But I think I love Morning Combat with Luke Thomas and Brian Campbell. I think their show is fantastic. Getting a 2-guy team like that delivers that every start of the week is great. Obviously, Ariel Hawani's done his show for well over a decade now. Still one of the biggest, one of the most popular. So those shows reign supreme. The others, I mean, there's limitless podcasts. It's a very saturated market. It's hard to get people to care, right? Hard to get people to follow. So there are a lot of good things I see. A lot of things like I don't care to. I'm kind of very selective. I have certain pods that I listen to. I have certain shows I definitely tune in for. Others I might tune in if it's an athlete I'm interested in hearing about. But some I'm not going to tune in every week, so to speak. But there's good and bad. I hate to see all the layoffs happening now, especially someone that's I'm still on the bubble. Seeing like the guys on The Athletic, that was tough to see those guys lose the gigs, and especially that thing was looked like it was getting momentum. Chiapetta leaving, getting axed from MMA fighting. He's an OG. He's been in the game a long time. Several other guys. I think P.T. Carroll from MMA fighting. Who else? I think The Athletic. There's just been so many people that have, it's a tough job. It's a tough time for journalism, period. Whatever sport you cover, newspapers are going down, budgets are going down. People don't want to subscribe. They don't want to pay for news, and advertising's gone down with this pandemic. So it's just a really tough time. And a rough time for sports journalism as a whole, let alone MMA. It sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, like I worked for a newspaper too, and when this all happened, I was like, oh man, like this is gonna be bad, just because those were already struggling coming in. Most media sites were, and then like this is just kind of like the hammer. But you brought up a lot of stuff I want to get into, a lot to unpack. But one of the things too is like right away you were kind of talking about just like how so many people are kind of like in this like business now, as far as like you said, a lot of fan stuff, and like that just made me like think to like my like first year of like college, and like the professors are telling us like, like you might be getting like a journalism major, but they're like everybody is a journalist nowadays because they have a phone, they have a computer, and it's so easy just to go on Twitter and be like, well, this happened and that happened. And one thing I think is kind of interesting is like with like I saw like Khalil, I don't know if you saw, but Khalil Rountree yesterday too, like he was even kind of like mouthing off a little bit yesterday. Was mad that certain websites kind of covered that. They said that he was going to fight Greg Hardy. He said that, like don't try to be first, just try to be accurate. And like that's like another thing I feel like that is almost kind of missed today. Like everybody wants to get those clicks, and they're so desperate to get that the quality kind of goes out the door sometimes.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the biggest ones was John Jones' arrest back in 2015. I think it was MMA Weekly botched something. I think they had cocaine in the story that he was found with, and it was like you can't go with a legal story with a source unless you have to go by the book. Mm-hmm. And they rushed to get that story, and then they looked like idiots. And to me, I was like, well, this is typical for MMA. Let's rush to be first instead of being accurate and confirm the details with the police department themselves, like you're supposed to do as being a true reporter. I was on that case for a while with MMA Mania. It was constant phone calls and constant following up with people in Albuquerque, and like that, the stuff you're supposed to do when you're chasing a legal story like that. And I think people rush to do stuff. And also too, like try to get people on the phone, try to contact people. If everything is always quoting quotes, and that's in all news now too. It's like you see like a celebrity die. Oh, so-and-so said this on Twitter. And it's like, well, can you get them on the phone? Can you hear like what they really want to say in this moment about the person that passed away? You know what I mean? Like there's a rush, and a lot of stuff is sloppy at times. And, usually the good reporters, who you go to, and I'm sure you have a select few that you follow that you go to for news that you can trust, and others you'll look at it and kind of raise your eyebrow and then try to do some following up, and you're like, well, I can't trust this yet. I have to see more. Yeah.
No, it's funny, like you just brought that up too, because it made me think back to I was writing for an MMA website, and I was pretty recently out of college, but I remember BJ Penn had gotten in trouble. I think he had like punched a bouncer at like a strip club or something. But anyways, I had called the like Hawaii police just to see if anything had been reported, anything like that. And I put that in the story that I contacted them. They said that there was like, nothing on their record. His name wasn't coming up. And I remember the editor had messaged me and was like, wait, did you actually call? And I was like, yeah. He was like, oh, okay. Like, because like a lot of people don't do that. Like you said, like if they get that story from TMZ or something, according to TMZ, like they're like that kind of thing.
And there's a lot of editors that don't do their job correctly either. Yeah. Like your job is to make sure you go over things. I mean, I had instances where I had to let my editor know at MMA Mania because I saw a story on our site that had inaccurate information, like an arrest. And then I would inbox the writer, and I'd be like, what is this? This is not, did you read the police report? Like, what are you doing? Like, stuff that just blows your mind. And like, no one caught it. And then I caught it and contacted my editor. I was like, we got to fix this. Like, cause now you're talking about being liable for things that aren't truthful and things like that. I think there's just so much, and there's lack of pay, obviously. And there's a lot of things wrong with.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things. Still.
Because like you said too, like what people like too is like so different too. Because like even this week, like if you think about it, like obviously Jorge Masvidal was like a huge story. Like Khabib's father was like another big story. But then like a lot of people are talking about like Sean O'Malley on Twitter and going back and forth with like Cody Garbrandt. And like those are the stories that are kind of like going out there. And you're like, how are these even competing with like a Jorge Masvidal or things like that? And like also with the Jorge Masvidal, like everyone's talking about the pizza thing. Like he stopped in Rome and had like a bite of pizza, and everyone's like giving him crap for that. Like it's just like it is like insane. Like what actually like is retweetable, those kind of things.
Yeah, listen, people like what they like. You know, popularity, it's an organic thing. It either happens or it doesn't. And there'll be fighters that people want. I mean, the card got bigger once Masvidal got on it, and Gilbert Burns, and listen, hope he recovers, obviously, from COVID. That's scary stuff. But of course that wasn't going to be as big until Masvidal, who's one of the hottest fighters on the planet right now. He's had that 3-fight win streak, you know, smoked Askren, beat Maya, and what was the first one? He knocked out Darren Till. So he's had quite the 3-fight run, put himself this relevant late in the game. So him eating pizza is gonna top pretty much most of the random run-of-the-mill stories that come out. They're gonna go, oh, what mass? He's got 20 pounds to cut and he's eating pizza. I mean, listen, I was like, I kind of scratched my head. I was like, is he taking a bite or is he really eating piece after piece?
Yeah.
But no, it does. It never ceases to amaze you, the absolute garbage nonsense that fans eat up. They eat it up.
Well, now that you brought the Jorge Masvidal and Gilbert Burns, well, let's go right into like the kind of the topics too. And my first one too was just, you know, I know everyone kind of like it always seemed like the Masvidal Usman fight. Obviously, like you said, like that's the one everybody wanted. That's what originally was expected, especially after the year that Masvidal had, and his like whole story too. I mean, he used to fight in like backyards. Like he's like a perfect story. But then like I don't know, like even when this all happened and like the Burns Usman fight, like that had like a great story in itself too, just with them being like training partners. And two, like for you just personally, like what was the more intriguing main event? I mean, it sounds like you were kind of leaning towards more Masvidal Usman.
Yeah, I think they were both intriguing because Burns has been on a great run too. I mean, he just made Woodley look terrible, right? I mean, he really just dominated Tyrone Woodley, and I think he's won 5 or 6 straight too. So he's been on a tear. Really deservedly earned that shot. Usman, I think, is the one who's really not getting enough respect, in my opinion. You're talking about the most skilled guy in that division right now, holds the title, only lost once, got through that war with Colby, which was one of the best fights in years. That fight was incredible when those two went at it. I mean, just he showed the heart, guts, survival instincts, everything you want to see, well-rounded skill set. I think he beats Masvidal by unanimous decision and retains the title. It's tough, you know, Masvidal, the story with him, and I think a lot of this always shifts in MMA, is that everybody loves his story, where he comes from, like you mentioned. He was fighting with the Kimbo Slice fights, backyards. Well, they used to call him like Street Jesus, right? And you know, late in his career, I think he's this is the most fights anyone's had in the UFC before a title fight, if I'm not mistaken. And he caught fire at the right time. That went over Askren, all the media. He was on like Dan Le Batard's show and on ESPN, and he's really kind of had this resurgence late in his career. And like, he was really having just like a ho-hum career. I think he was around, at least in the UFC. I know he's won 30 some odd fights, but in the UFC, he was only like 9-6 or so before he went on this 3-fight run. So he was kind of there. He was always a very respectable opponent, a skilled guy. No one you'd certainly just run through by any means. Mm-hmm. But now he catches fire, and now he's in a title fight. I mean, he could win the fight. And my buddy Luke Thomas was saying, like, you know, if he wins the fight, you might lure Conor McGregor out of retirement. So there's that aspect to it too. I think both fights themselves pretty similar as far as interest for me, Burns versus Usman or Masvidal versus Usman. But I think the narrative and what happens, you know, after the fight and what are the different ways it can go, different avenues it can move, I think that Masvidal trumps it. And I think him coming in there short notice, the whole thing, nothing to lose, let's let it rip and see what happens. Usman's got to change his game plan up from Burns now to Masvidal. So they're all the way over there in Abu Dhabi on Yas Island. So there's a lot of intriguing storylines this week with that main event.
Yeah, like I think like you brought up a good point. Like there's a lot more, I think, like moving pieces if like with this fight too than if it was going to be like a Burns Usman. But also too, I think Masvidal, like his storyline gets better. Like you touched it right at the end there too. Is because it's on like short like notice too. And like I think for Masvidal, like even if he loses this, like I don't see his stock going down that much just because of like the circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, unless he gets smoked, if he gets smoked and finished in a round, then maybe his stock would plummet. But he goes out there on a week's notice and fights hard through 5 rounds. I don't think his stock goes down hardly at all.
Yeah. Like, I think for me, the reason why I really did like that Burns fight too, though, is because of like, just like the matchup in general. I just thought as far as like an actual like fight, I thought it was a better matchup stylistically. Plus, both guys know each other. So like that was going to be like kind of interesting too. Like do they like, do they just go at it or do they like really respect each other? Like how does a fight like that kind of unfold? Was like, I think that's what I was kind of looking forward to. And I hope he recovers quickly.
Yeah, me too, man. I mean, he was on fire and he looked fantastic in his last bout. He's been on a long run, so I'm looking forward to seeing what's next for him. So yeah, it was a great stylistic matchup for sure between those two.
Yeah. And then just going to the next topic too. I mean, say if, Masvidal isn't there to kind of save the day and, they're not able to work out anything with like Covington or whatever, and they end up just scrapping his card completely. Well, not card, but the main event bout. So you're left with, I guess, 2 title fights, and most likely, I guess, Volkanovski and Holloway would probably be the main event. But altogether, if they didn't have this welterweight title fight on this card, how much do you feel like that would hurt the card as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, losing the main event would always be super hard, and it's happened. I mean, look, it's happened on big July 4th weekends. I think what happened with Holloway, right? With Aldo dropped out, I think once. I think there was, or no, Holloway dropped out, I think, and Aldo fought Frankie maybe. I think in 2000. It
happened with Cormier too, because he fought Anderson Silva.
Right, and then the Miesha Tate Nunes fight became the main event because something dropped out, right? That was the year Brock. I think Holloway. Remember, he had that weird, like they thought he was concussed. He had that weird interview. Yeah. I think that was one of the 4th of July. So there's been a few main events that have dropped out like on International Fight Week, because that's what this would be right now with this fight card would be internationally the big home run Super Bowl card of the year. So. I think it's certain that there are a lot of good fights on the card, but yeah, I think it would have taken a lot of steam off of it not having that. It's interesting though. I mean, you don't have no heavyweight title, no John Jones, no Izzy Adesanya on this card. So I still don't think it's the creme de la creme, but it is 3 title fights.
Yeah. I also feel like too, as far as like the featherweight title fight goes, like there's not like tons of excitement around this just because of the way the first one went. Like, I understand why they gave it to Holloway. Like, he's been the reigning champ for a long time now. But just I think the way that one went, too, and a lot of people, like, everyone was kind of talking about yesterday how with Holloway's comments in the scrum and how he was like, oh, like, I felt like I still won the fight. And a lot of people were like, what? Like, how do you think that? And I think that's maybe one of the reasons, too, why I don't think this, like, would have been as big without that welterweight. Just because, like, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of excitement around that. And same thing with the bantamweight fight as well, because a lot of people were kind of arguing that maybe Jan didn't deserve it, or Aldo coming off a loss too. I mean, I just thought there was a couple of things in here that as far as like excitement level, there wasn't a lot to get behind.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Max Holloway is still one of the best featherweights on the planet. It's just that Volkanovski is incredible. I mean, he came out of nowhere, and the way that he city kickboxing, man. I mean, you're talking to someone that's covered kickboxing a long time, probably to my detriment. But but I knew about Izzy and a lot of those guys before they came out. I mean, that's elite striking. That's missing. Hold on, my microphone's.
That's all right.
The swing arm went out. There it is. Technical difficulty. Got to go on the fly. There's a lot of elite level striking that's missing in MMA. That's very prominent in kickboxing and boxing. Obviously, you have more disciplines and stuff to be well-rounded, but for the most part, I mean, how many fight cards have you seen just fights with bad boxing after bad boxing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So like when you watch elite striking, and Max is elite as well, but when you watch elite striking, is really something special that I don't think gets appreciated enough, because the fans seem to like a barroom brawl with no defense most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But to watch Volkanovski operate and what he did to one of the best featherweights on the planet, you know, just dominated him. It was something special. So I do like the rematch. You know, listen, Holloway also too. I think at some point, some of the wars and the with Poirier and I think those are gonna catch up, because remember, he started young, so he's
like
still
19 or something.
Yeah, he's still pretty young, but you're gonna start to you know, the tread on the tire gets thinned down earlier than later when you start young. So I do have some concern for him there, but it would be something. I mean, they talked about lack of training because it was strict in Hawaii, so not having a lot of time to prepare for the champ. That's going to be something to look at for sure. But I do like the matchup. I know he dominated him, but it did go to a decision, so I didn't have a problem with the rematch with those two. But Volkanovski, man, I don't think he's getting enough of his due either. That dude's legit, man.
Yeah. No, it's funny too, because like I said, Holloway was 19, but he was 19 just when he was in the UFC. So that wasn't even like when he started competing either, which is crazy.
Kind of like Stefan Struve, who was like, I think 17 or 18.
Yeah. But do you see this rematch? Do you see it going like any differently?
No, I think Volkanovski is better. It's crazy too, because Holloway's probably heads and tails better than the rest of the division, except for Volkanovski, and yet there's a huge gap, and he showed it last time. Like, anything can happen, obviously, as the old cliche goes, but for my money, yeah, I think Volkanovski will win another decision.
Yeah. Well, what are kind of your feelings too around the bantamweight bout? Because I know those kind of received too some negative feedback too, just because a lot of people thought maybe like an Aljamain Sterling or like a Marlon Moraes deserved it a little more.
100%. I hated it. Again, that goes back to what I said earlier with the UFC lacking creativity and imagination. I mean, the thing to do for me for the bantamweight was to make a tournament. You didn't have to do it a one-night tournament. You could have had two semis, put a title fight as the main event, put two other fights, two bantamweight matchups, Moraes, Aljo, Jan, and if you wanted to have Aldo go in, fine. And then get the winners in the next pay-per-view and then have them fight for the title. Instead, they just say, oh, we're going to put Aldo and Peter. It's like, come on. Because obviously they're trying to make it a winnable fight, as winnable as they can. I mean, listen, I will fall over if Aldo makes weight. I don't think he's going to make 135. That's going to really surprise me. Again, I could be out of my mind, but like he's struggled so many times with 45. Mm-hmm. Now he's going to make 35.
Yeah.
And if he makes it, he's going to look like a skeleton. So that made me scratch my head. Like, really? I would rather. And then remember the time before that, I think when they vacated the 45 for Conor, they just like gave the belt to Aldo.
Yeah.
Which is like, again, I said the same thing. I was like, really? This is all you could think of was just hand it to him? So, yeah, I did not like this matchup at all. I am intrigued to see, like, what Jose Aldo we're going to get at bantamweight, because if he does make weight, how affected is he going to be? Because he's already had a hell of a cut to get to 45.
Yeah.
So now he's got even a worse cut, longer travel. I don't know, man. But, yeah, I mean, that part's intriguing, but yeah, initially hated that they couldn't do anything better than that. And you know, Aljo and Moraes, both of those guys, you know, those two should be are really truly deserving of fighting for the.
Yeah. Yeah, like I thought Jan deserved to be in the mix for sure. I was just surprised.
Tournament for sure.
Yeah, but I was just surprised too when I think it was right after Cejudo retired at 249, and Dana White's in the press conference, and he's like, well, it's somebody and Jan. Like, he knew right away, like Jan was going to be in that. And I was just like, I don't know. I was like, you didn't even I was like, we're not even considering
And then Aljo smoke, who did he smoke last time?
Sanhagen.
Yeah. Who's a tough customer himself.
Yeah.
He subbed him, didn't he?
Yeah, it was fast too.
Yeah. So, you have to feel, but listen, I mean, whoever wins, Aljo probably gets the the first crack at him.
Yeah.
And then Moraes is still a killer too.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, that division's fun.
Yeah. And you talk about strikers too, and just staying in bantamweight too. I know like O'Malley's a guy who he's got tons of like just power behind him right now as far as just fans and the UFC pushing him as well. But like for you, like I know a lot of fighters will say too, like, oh, he's not as good as you think. But like as far as just like I mean, his ground game is one thing, but like as far as just his striking too, like what have you seen from him? I mean, do you feel like he is as good as some people think?
Yeah, I think he's the real deal. He certainly has all the elements of a great fighter. He delivers, he finishes. Moments never too big for him. He's got that confidence. He's got that confidence and not cocky. He's just he's a cool cat, right? He operates as a cool customer, but he gets in there and he delivers, puts on big fights, big finishes. Let's see him move up the ranks against the rest of the guys, which I'm looking forward to. But yeah, I do think he's the real deal for sure.
Yeah. It's funny because I saw an interview he did with Leo Vaughn actually, but like even just in that conversation, it was like I kind of was like sitting there just like wowed and like listening to O'Malley talk because like you said, like he's a confident kid, but like it was to the point where I was just like in my head, I'm like, wow, like this kid like sold me, like he really like believes himself.
Yeah, like you want to be friends with him too, right?
Yeah,
he's the guy you invite over to hang out. Like this guy,
yeah.
Cool. Come on, hang out with us. Yeah.
Yeah, like he's not a kid that's just like saying it to say it. Like when he's talking and like talking about how he would like beat a wrestler and stuff too, you're like, oh, huh, like he's got a point, like and that was the thing. I was like, wow, like I mean, he's just like a really like well-spoken kid too.
Yeah, and he's out there smoking fools in the octagon. I mean, he's just blitzing people. So
yeah, and
it's fun to see at the low weight classes. Like seeing dudes finish like that with dropping dudes with power like that at that weight. That's not something you see every fight card.
Yeah. And it's like the way he's doing it too. Like when he knocked out Weiland too, it wasn't like he had this like leaping like hook or any of this like huge shot either. Like I know a lot of people are kind of like talking about the Garbrandt fight because that was the same one too. But those were like two very different knockouts because his was just kind of like a nice setup with I think it was like a cross and kind of just caught Weiland like right on like the counter because it came right after he missed the spinning kick.
Yeah, he just. I was like,
yeah.
He's got a lot of highlights on his reel at a young age.
Yeah, for sure.
And more to come.
Yeah. And then the last topic too is just like I feel like something that you can't really get around now. We talked about Gilbert Burns, but I think Pedro Munoz was one of the more recent actual like fighters that was supposed to fight on the 15th that tested positive for COVID. Vinicius Moreira was on that list. Anderson Dos Santos. We just found about Mike Brown not being able to coach Jorge Masvidal last night. I saw a report today that apparently Michael Bisping was saying that Paul Felder isn't going to be there. He didn't test positive, but he was sitting next to Din Thomas, who did. So obviously, like this thing is affecting. Like for you, on a scale of 1 to 10, like how are you surprised? Like, are you surprised that we're hearing more and more guys kind of test positive for this in the world of MMA?
Not at all. Yeah. Not at all, man. I'm like less than 1. It's just inevitable. It's just. The more you're around, the more you're doing things, the more you're traveling, the more you're in planes with recycled air, especially training too. If someone has it, whoever you're training with is going to get it. Your corners are close to you. They're in the same room with you in the hotel or wherever you are. It's not a surprise to me. They just have to really, I'm glad that they're taking the proper steps. Like, cause even like the Florida card a couple months ago where they like, went on with the fight. Who was it? Jacare was positive.
Yeah, the night.
And you saw him and Verdum hanging out in the lobby. I mean, that at least like they had the protocol for the Apex, and they didn't have him travel. There's protocol on the island. Like you need protocol, and it was always people were like, oh, you just test, and there was so much. Everyone kept talking about testing. It was driving me crazy. It's like it's not. It's about what do you do when someone tests positive? How do you quarantine them? What are the proper protocols to keep other people safe so it doesn't spread? And those are the things you have to deal with. And you're seeing it across all, whether it's Major League Baseball players right now, NBA player. They haven't even started the NBA season, and every day you turn on SportsCenter and someone else has it, right? Mm-hmm. Same thing with some NFL players. Same thing with college. You keep hearing about more. I think it's just going to be part of it. They're going to try to go through and try to get sports going, but you're going to have more cases. hopefully they can get a hold on it and it doesn't spread, or we don't have a really disastrous event where multiple people get it. So
yeah,
fingers crossed. But yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all. It's just the reality we live in right now. It's inevitable.
Yeah. I think like what was probably the most concerning for me too out of these cases was the hearing about Dan Thomas too, because he actually like was on the plane.
Yeah.
So he was able to make it onto the plane, and then there, like obviously like I'm sure he didn't know he had it, but like still it's like then it's like, well, one got by then, like, you know, like there is possibility of these guys getting on the plane and being around everyone else and this recycled air too.
Yeah.
And
planes scare the hell out of me right now. You couldn't get me on the plane for $1 million.
Yeah. No, it's really crazy.
It's and hopefully I mean, listen, we've seen so much stupidity with people, with governors not taking it seriously. I mean, like the Texas governor the other day was like mandating. It's like, where were you 3 months ago?
Yeah.
Like you want to walk around and just smack people for being stupid.
Yeah. The Florida governor's not even going that far. He said it's like, oh, it's up to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
that's
like,
the problem.
Yeah.
You have we live in the greatest country on earth, right? And one of the greatest things about it is having different governors able to run their state as they see fit. But in a pandemic, it's just abject failure because they can't all get on the same page.
Yeah.
And you have partisan lines where some Republicans don't think it's a big deal. And look at those states. Look at Texas. Look at Florida. And then you have like my state, Michigan, run well. Look at what Cuomo's done after New York got crazy and they had to like get it somewhat back to normal again. I mean, imagine if Governor DeSantis ran New York.
Yeah.
Just imagine.
I don't think about that.
Right, and that's what I think. I'm like, thank God I have Governor Whitmer. A lot of people don't like her. I love her. I thought she did a great job. But I think to myself, I tell my wife, I'm like, imagine if DeSantis or Abbott from Texas had Michigan. Like, it would be bedlam.
Yeah.
And that's the scary part about it. Like, you have to hope that you're in a good state with a competent governor to keep you and your fellow citizens safe. It's scary times right now.
Yeah, for sure. And like nothing too with Florida. If you look at it, like a lot of these fighters that are testing it, like are from the Florida area. If you actually look at like Gilbert Burns, and like he was saying that like Emlong Ansong had it. And I actually saw Gilbert Burns' interview with ESPN, and they asked him, they said, "Do you think it's like a gym problem?" He's like, "No, it's a Florida problem."
Yeah,
he said, because he's like you go out, he's like no one has masks on. He's like there's no authority like saying that they are pushing you to put the mask on or anything like that. So he's like, it's like almost like a free for all.
Yeah, it's so frustrating, man. I still deal with it. Like, I just try to stay away from places that don't mask up. It's like, but it's hard. Like I went to Kroger the other day and like there was like multiple people not wearing masks, and you start going to the outside of the aisles and you feel like you're like Brad Pitt in World War Z trying to get groceries. That's why most of the time we go to Trader Joe's, because you can't get in without a mask. They limit the amount of people in the store, and it's like a calm shopping experience. But then you go somewhere else and you're like, what is going on right now?
Yeah.
It's just scary, man. It's scary. And even if you have people in your family that are more at risk or immunocompromised, it's scary stuff, man. It's really scary.
Yeah, especially because too, like you could have this. Like I remember, like Burns was saying too, like you can have this thing and not know you did. Like, because for him too, he was saying, he's like, oh, I just thought I had a headache. Like he even had like a little symptom, but just like it didn't hit him that he had it until the test said you're like, and that's what's crazy.
Yeah, I suffer from allergies, so like I'll get stuffy or a sinus headache, and like every time I have one, I'm like taking my temperature, like and then I'm being safe, but it's like it's the other people that are selfish and reckless that ruin it for people who are trying to do the right. No one wants to wear a mask. Who wants to wear a mask? No one. Yeah. But you don't want to spread it to someone if you have it. It's called being conscientious and being thoughtful and caring and kind towards other people. But apparently that's a bridge too far for many who live in this country. It's sad, man. It's sad to think about how many people just don't care about other people.
Yeah.
It bothers me to my core. It really does.
And before I let you go, Michael, I mean, we kind of end on a little somber note there, but anything positive, anything you want to say before I let you go?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Michael_Stets, and my podcast, The Michael Stets Show, is available wherever you get your podcasts. The last one I did, I talked to Jonathan Snowden, so it's a little dated, but still had a great conversation with him. I'm working on getting them going more frequently. And if you're in my area, WJR 760, I am part of the Lions coverage there. So when the Lions season kicks off, I will be back part of the pregame coverage. I do feature stories, interviews and segments and stuff during the pregame show. So that's pretty much, I'm still hoping I get back into the MMA coverage world at some point, but for now, just my Michael Stets Show pod, wherever you can get podcasts, check it out.
Yeah. How confident are you that we see some like NFL college football this year?
I think we will. I think stoppages are inevitable, or a late start is inevitable, but I think money drives the ship. I mean, it's $1 billion industry with the NFL, so I think it's definitely going to start. It's strange, and just to give you a little tidbit, the right now the supposed coverage for training camp, and they're still working it out with the Players Association whether or not they even have preseason games, but it's only going to be a handful of pool reporters. So there's not going to even be people at practice. There's going to be like 4 pool reporters. That's how news is going to come out of training camp now. It used to be like I love training camp because I'd be there every day, taking in the practices, talking to players afterward and all that. And there's not going to be any in-person interviews now. Only we've been doing them during the off season for some of the Lions players on Zoom. But the whole way the sport is covered is going to change just drastically. And then watching NFL games with no fans is going to be, it's like, how sized can the announcers get when someone scores a touchdown? It's going to be like old school Pat Summerall, right? Like thrown to the end zone, touchdown. We're really in like unprecedented times. It's going to be weird, but I do think sports they're going to try to push forward no matter what, but there's probably going to be a stoppage or a delay in the start of the season.
Yeah. And it's like you said too, like you want the UFC to be creative, but we'll see how it will be interesting to see how these different platforms and different channels kind of do that coverage of the sports too, like in different circumstances.
Yeah, and the UFC is more advantageous for them to keep going. I mean, they shouldn't be, patting themselves on the back like they have the answers like they've been doing recently. I think I forgot who said something, but I read that article and I was like, don't get cocky now. You have a much different, much more advantageous ability based on certain number of fighters per card. You can, you have teams upon teams in the NFL. You don't have 53 players, 55, whatever, and trainers and coaches and you know what I mean? Like it's a whole different story playing an extended game with that many people on the field and all those things, as opposed to quarantining 2 guys that are going to fight and then getting another 2 guys. You know what I mean? Like, and listen, great for the UFC, but let's have a little dose of reality here too. You didn't figure out the secret ingredient, so to speak. You have a lot of advantages that the other stick and ball sports do not.
Yeah. Well, I think you can kind of see that too, just because the fact, like, you're not seeing like you said, like the NBA and them, like they want it to be back faster, but it's not working out. So
I mean, my buddy told me today, my buddy Nate was like, there's going to be a future 30 for 30 just on this NBA bubble. I mean, because they can't even get to the bubble yet, and there's multiple. They're not going to have teams. Other guys are refusing to play. I mean, you know what I mean? It's just like there's 2020. It's just like. Crazy. And we're already kind of desensitized. We're sort of taking it for granted, right? Because we're around here chatting on Skype and living our lives, but we are in the middle of a pandemic. Like, it's something me and my wife do every once in a while too. We'd be driving, I'm like, we are in the middle of a pandemic. I think we maybe forgot today. You know what I mean? It's just because that's our thing as America. We just go forward every day. You just do your job, you do your work, you take care of your house, you mow your lawn.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, you go. But we're still in it. Like, so with sports, with everything, this is just truly one of the most bizarre years ever in the history of our country. And we're in living history right now in real time. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. Well, Michael, thanks a lot for taking this time to spend with us during this pandemic. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, man.
Well, there you have it, my conversation with Michael Stets. Once again, big thanks to Michael for coming on. Big thanks to all the guests that have been coming on. I mean, it's been really great. It's been like really smooth too, and I think we've like gained just like a lot of experience talking to each of the guys. And I always love the debates too, just because like you're getting like 3 different perspectives, all in one time, and I think it just makes good conversation.
Yeah, for sure. I don't want to give anything away here, but I'm pretty sure we're planning on bringing on some of the young guns from MMA Junkie. So make sure you stay tuned to that. Obviously, we're going to do what we can to make it happen. But listen, we got to keep the guests flowing, keep the stuff interesting. I really like being able to talk to them about their career. And then, it's like, all right, we talked about the career stuff. Let's get into some fun stuff about fighting. Like, I think it's a good contrast for the show.
Yeah. And like we said, like before the Stets interview too, like Lucas just said, like, I think I think we've done a good job, and I think we're going to continue to do a good job of like just being real versatile with like our guests. Like he said, we're going to start bringing some like, some of the young guns in. We're going to have like some guys that, we're editors at different places too. Like we have a lot of big plans, a lot of things in works too. So I'm excited for that. But one thing I'm also excited for is a decent segue, I think, is Fight Island. I mean, this is the first of 4 Fight Island events. Yas Island, Abu Dhabi, call it what you want. It's still great promoting. UFC 251, three title fights, a lot to look for. And I think we kind of touched about this a little bit last week because one of the ones I was actually going to pick, I decided not to because Mike Heck picked it last week. And I didn't want to copy him. So I'll start with you, Lucas. Like, what would you say on this card with when you have these 3 title fights, you got, Paige Van Zandt also on this card. So many big fights. What is the most underrated fight on this card?
Underrated is an easy answer. It's the last card on the prelims, and that's unfortunately I don't know how to say his name, but we're gonna give it a go here. But it's the Volkanovski fight. He's taking on Giri Prochazka, or however you say that. I'm pretty sure that's not how you say it, but for sure it's the most underrated fight. Like I was asked to make some picks today, and everyone's picking Volkanovski, and I'm like, well, first of all, it's going to be a great fight, but people are already picking Volkanovski just because he's a UFC guy, just because he's the name they recognize. So underrated, and I believe Giri is underrated as well. So I'm really looking forward to this one for sure. Like if away from the main card, away from the title fights, away from Paige Van Zandt, for me, this is definitely the fight that you need to be looking out for.
Yeah. That was actually the one I was going to pick, and I decided not to. So I'm glad. So we'll be a little different. But I actually, just because I thought I was going to do this one, I actually did, look up their names, and I'm pretty sure it's Yuri Prochazka.
Oh,
I had written it out differently so I could pronounce it right, and then I think you were pretty close. It was like Vulkanovski, I think is how you pronounce.
Well, no, Volkanovski for sure, because I've interviewed him and he speaks French, okay. So Vulcan for sure, but Yuri definitely not. That was whatever it was not good. That was not his name.
Yeah, and that's just crazy fight too, because even if you just look at who they fought too. Uzdemir, it's crazy because he had 3 straight losses, but Daniel Cormier, Anthony Smith, Dominic Reyes, they either fought the titles or held the title. And I mean, if you're going to, I don't think anyone ever wants to lose 3 in a row, but if you're going to lose 3 in a row, those are not bad names to have kind of I guess, on that skid. I mean, this is a guy who I think, I mean, I don't want to call him a gatekeeper, but I think he's a guy that like Prochazka too, who this is a highly touted prospect. He's on a 10-fight win streak. So I think going against a guy like Usman, this is not an easy task at all. Yeah. And to just kind of come in there like this, I mean, it's crazy. And you look at Prochazka too, and you're oh, well, he is maybe not as UFC seasoned, but you look, he has 8 straight wins by TKO knockout. And the last 5 guys, I think, are CB Holloway, Fabio Maldonado, King Mo, Brandon Halsey, and Jake Yoon. He's got a great resume of his own. But for my pick, I went a little different. 2 guys coming off losses, but I'm kind of interested just personally in the Danny Henry, Makwan, Amir Khani fight. I just think that's a fight that, it's kind of I kind of like that. The same reasons I like the other one we just talked about too. Is you look at Henry, he's a guy who he lost to Danny Ige in his last fight, but that was his first UFC loss, and then before that, he was on a 5-fight win streak, and his last win was over Hakeem Dawodu, who, I mean, I think is a really good fighter, and he beat him by first-round submission. Yeah. So that's really interesting. And Amir Khani, if you've ever seen his Tabology page, I think he's got the best picture there. It's him on the couch. He's got, 4 models. It's great. But other than that, I mean, this is a guy that, he's been with the UFC since 2015. That's something that I kind of, didn't even realize either. He's just a guy that I kind of had slipped under the radar. but his only losses are to Shane Burgos and Arnold Allen.
Yeah.
So here's a guy too who like he's beaten. I mean, I saw he had like a win against Andy Ogle, which made me think of like the Ultimate Fighter and all that. But yeah, like I just think that's going to be another interesting fight too. And I believe that's two fights below the Uzdemir and Prochaska fight.
Of course, I mean, some other fights we can shout out real quick. Obviously, Leonardo Santos, kind of a unicorn, fights once a year, goes out there, beats someone that everyone's heard of. I mean, like Kevin Lee, last time out he had I forgot his name off the top of my head, from Scotland. So I mean, he's going out there and he's beating these guys. So he's putting on an interesting sort of run. But unless he fights more, it's going to be a little bit disappointing. And Zaleski dos Santos obviously comes. He brings in every fight, so that's going to be a good one too. I mean, low key, these prelims are pretty stacked. I mean, even Mr. Finland on here and stuff like that. Some really great fights on the prelim to back up a great main card.
Yeah. What's kind of crazy too is a name when I was first looking at this just stood out to me just because of like it just made me start thinking. But Davey Grant, who's fighting Martin Day, Davey Grant, a guy who was like a finalist on the Ultimate Fighter, I believe it was Rousey and Tate season, and I think that was like what in 2000? I want to say like was that 2013?
Yeah, 2013, 2012, something like that. I'm not
yeah,
even,
like
not
2013,
even sure.
And I think he's only fought like this will be his 5th fight in the UFC. Crazy. So from that time, it's like there's a guy we haven't seen much of. So I'm just kind of interested just to see him do just basically like kind of I guess just because of the Ultimate Fighter days. Like whenever I see those guys, especially from guys that were on like kind of I don't want to say like super past episodes, but just kind of like far like 2013, that is 7 years ago, to see that he's only had that many fights till now. It'd be interesting to see like how that plays out too.
For sure.
And then let's just touch on this main card too, because the reason we kind of did this to talk about the underrated fights is because this main card is pretty stacked. I mean, just kind of give us your thoughts too. I mean, we just got a new headliner, which I think most people are happy about.
Yeah, I mean, this whole main card, stacked. I mean, they came out, they weren't playing. They said Fight Island, we're going to bring you 5 bangers just on the main card. All 3 title fights, obviously, I love them. I know people are not too happy about Petr Yan versus Jose Aldo, but, I love it. I mean, Aldo's still showing that he's a great fighter, so that's a great fight. Co-main event, I didn't necessarily agree with the rematch. It's still going to be a pretty good fight. It's not going to be the most exciting fight, but it's a decent fight. It's a good technical matchup. And now the main event, forget about it. I mean, Kamaru Usman versus Jorge Masvidal. I'm curious to see how Masvidal is going to look on a week's notice, but for me, that boosted the card. I had no problem with the Gilbert Burns fight. That was great, but that boosted the card for sure. Then Andrade Namajunas. Namajunas got finished against Andrade and turned everyone on MMA Twitter into pussies. So hopefully this time around that doesn't happen. And then Amanda Ribas versus Paige Van Zandt. Great fight. A lot of stakes. I mean, Ribas for me is a future star if she can sort of get everything figured out, especially with the language barrier. Her English is getting better, so she has a big future. And then Paige Van Zandt, obviously, we're going to find out with free agency and all her TikTok dances.
Yeah. And that Andrade and Namajunas fight, too, like, I keep thinking that, like, almost, like, is a title fight. Just because, like, I think about the time when they first fought each other, and that was a title fight. So, like, when everyone keeps saying, like, 3, I'm like, no, it's 4. And then I'm like, oh, wait, no. Like, Andrade lost the title. But, that, like, I do keep thinking that. I think it just shows you, like, how stacked this card is. But one thing I did want to ask you before we move on real quick is, I posed this question to Michael as well, but say like, George Masvidal doesn't step in, Kobe Covington, that like doesn't happen, so no one fights, say Volkanovski Holloway becomes the main event, we lose that fight completely. How does that change this card? Like, does that change your excitement for this?
For me, for sure, because even the main event before, I was excited from a style perspective. Now it's like not only do we get a great style perspective, but we get like a real story, and these two guys seem to not like each other or whatever it is that they're doing. So the main event for me is what I like about a good card is when you get to that main event, you get excited. You get a little bit jittery, and you're like, man, this has real stakes, has real excitement. Volkanovski versus Max Holloway for me is missing that. The first result, I was so convinced that Volkanovski had the right game plan and knew how to shut down Holloway, because we've seen with Holloway, his lack of power means that if he starts losing the fight technically, the fight tends to run away from him a little bit because he's not going to get a flash finish. So for me, that would have missed a little bit of pizzazz, but I think the card was strong enough that it still would have been great. But that main event really just does a nice job bringing it all together and bringing that extra excitement that I think Holloway Volkanovski on its own, it's not enough. It wasn't enough excitement. It would have been like, okay, fine, but it doesn't do that good job of kind of culminating it the way Masvidal versus Usman does.
Yeah. No, I agree with that too, because I like you said, like I think with the two other title fights on this card, they're not like you said, like I think a lot of people just kind of had like some reservations about it too. Like some people were saying like, why did Holloway get the immediate rematch? I do kind of get it just because of the fact that he was reigning for so long, and like we've seen this before. Like this isn't the first time we've seen like a rematch like this. And then also too the Aldo and Petr Yan fight, like that's another one I think a lot of people like are kind of I think almost that's kind of like maybe like under the radar, just the fact that like people aren't that excited about it. Because I think a lot of people were like, they thought like Aljamain would be in a position like this. Like for me personally, I was thinking like Sterling, Moraes, like when this first happened, and Moraes, and like when Cejudo retired, like those were the first two guys that like popped in my head. Yeah. And then Aldo lost to Moraes, and then here he is like getting that shot, and then Petr Yan too. Some people question who he's fought to get here, and I think even like the night of UFC 249. I mean, right away, Dana White said Yan was definitely the guy, because I think the quote was like Yan and someone, so or somebody else. What I don't know exact words were, but it was something along those lines. So like with those two, yeah, I think they could stand alone. Like for me, like if I'm a fan, like I'm gonna still like I would still buy that pay-per-view just because I love the fights and whatever. But as far as like those casuals, because like I think we talked about this a heck last week, like. I have a lot of friends who are like never buy these fights. They're buying this one because it's the Fight Island one. And I don't know, like would those guys still buy in if, they find out that they're losing cards? And we're seeing that more and more now too with different guys. I mean, the July 15th card is getting hammered with guys like just with COVID-19 tests and whatnot. So.
Yeah, it's funny you speak about the casual because, in real life, not since high school, like today outside of high school, I don't know anyone that actually likes MMA. Like I can't have a conversation with anyone. And with my close friend, we have this tradition where anytime there's a pay-per-view, obviously when I'm in the United States, we go to Buffalo Wild Wings. And so, the whole card right there is you sell the fight. And last time was Miocic versus Cormier too. So, you're selling it. You're like, all right, so Cormier, this guy, the champion, blah, blah, Miocic, this and that. I feel like this one would be an easy sell, right? Like, you're like, listen, man, first of all, 3 title fights. And then Masvidal, like, he's this badass, whatever. Kamaru Usman, like, he's out there shutting up Colby Covington and the Trump people. Like, there's a real story you can sell. But if it was missing this main event, I feel like trying to sell that to my friend, it'd be like, well, it's a great fight on paper. It could be exciting. Like, it's missing the pizzazz that would really, have that excitement when you go to Buffalo Wild Wings.
Yeah, because I can only, I'm just like picturing like you like trying to explain to somebody too. You're like, well, there's just like this rematch, but like the first one wasn't really that close, and like so we'll see. And
exactly.
Yeah, like
you're sitting there like,
weren't sure if he deserved it, and then the guy he's fighting, they don't think he deserves it either.
But the thing is, I'm selling the shit out of these fights, like, man, Aldo's a killer. He was considered a GOAT for a very long time, and the problem is he saw Jose Aldo get knocked out. So how do you try to explain to him that was the GOAT? Like, well, ignore the 13 seconds. Like, he was the GOAT, and then a scary Russian guy. Like, I could try to put something together, but that main event just does my job for me.
Yeah. And, like, I do get, like, I don't want people to get the wrong opinion here. Like, I do see why Aldo is in that position. I mean, like, I think it's almost like Holloway. Like, he reigned for so long. He's got that name. Like, that's why he's in that position. I get it. Was that the right decision? I mean, I don't know if that's for me to say, but I don't think so. Like, But I can see why they went with that. I just don't necessarily agree with it.
But my problem is that I had Aldo winning against Moraes. And now the problem is that you can't just ignore the result that he lost and say like, oh, well, because I thought he won, he should get it. So from a merit standpoint, it's a little bit weird. But what I like is it keeps the division moving. Like we get a new champion and then Aljamain comes in and then it's going to be kind of tough to figure out the next guy. So I like that from that perspective, but I'm willing to put everything to the side and just enjoy it because it's going to be a great scrap. And I'm really curious about Aldo at 135. And if Yan beats him, he's legit. Like I feel like people weren't convinced with the retired skateboarder fight, and this one's going to tell us just how legit he is.
Yeah. No, I think you're right, too. Like, it does move the division along, too. It's going to be interesting to see, like, what happens to the other guys, too. Because you figure, like, Moraes Sandhagen kind of, like, goes in my head. But also, too, it's like, you figure if Frankie Edgar wins on July 15th, if he has a fight and wins, I mean, that's a guy that's automatically going to, like, just jump up and be a guy that possibly, won or – I mean, I wouldn't even be shocked if they just threw him in just because of his name and things like that. Like, no matter who it's against, just because it is Frank Yeager. He's a guy that was a former lightweight champion, which now at bantamweight is just kind of, like, crazy to wrap your mind around that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he's in a bad spot, though, because if Aldo wins, he's not going to get the shot. He's coming off a loss to a Korean Zombie, so there's a lot of factors in it for him. It's funny you talked about Moraes because I'm going to be talking to him soon. I found that out last weekend, I think, and apparently he was supposed to get a fight, but now nobody wants to fight him and stuff like that, so it's going to be very interesting to see kind of what's going on his end, but it sounds like he's a little bit stuck in the division.
Yeah, because I think it was like a week or two ago, I saw a couple of things with Moraes. And, I mean, he had some choice words, too, for everything that's been going on recently. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that. But, this weekend, too, Friday, like we said, kind of some normality. LFA, it's their first of 4 events, South Dakota. LFA 84, they were kind of hurting like everyone else. Wanted to get back in. Justin Gonzalez, I know, was actually the main event is Justin Gonzalez versus Jake Childers. And this was a fight that was supposed to happen prior. They were trying to schedule it. I think Childers had backed out for personal reasons. I'm not sure what. And then I think Gonzalez had another opponent, and then that kind of fell through with the pandemic and everything. But this is a guy that, like, Gonzalez, I mean, I talked to him, but just, like, even before that, one of the reasons I want to talk to him is just, like, he's a guy who's 10-0. He has a win on Dana White's Contender Series. I mean, I think he's got to be a guy that, I mean, maybe we could possibly, if he wins this, we'll see him back on the show. I want to say this summer, but, I mean, it could be in September with how everything's gone with the Contender Series. But, like Gonzalez, like, he even told me, too, that when he was on the Contender Series, they pretty much said to him, like, hey, listen, like, it's not going to work out this time, but they're like, you keep doing what you're doing, you're like, we'll invite you back. He said it was almost like a guarantee. So we'll see what happens. I think it all depends on also how he wins this fight, too. But I think it's a guy to look out for. And Jake Childers is no slouch here. I mean, these are 2 undefeated guys. I think it's a great, like, if you're a promotion like LFA, I think it's a really solid fight, too, especially it's a featherweight, I think vacant featherweight title fight. I mean, I think it's a great start to, kind of this series, their own fight islands, even though it's in South Dakota.
Yeah, South Dakota is definitely not a fight island, but it's good for the prospects. So I'm glad that they're going to get things going again because it's a good thing for them. I mean, LFA is fun to kind of, and it's very cheap for prospects, like as a journalist, because you look in there, and it'd be very easy to look at an event and kind of see which guys are going to have a chance in the UFC. So it's an easy cheat sheet, but good for the regional scene that LFA is backing at it, even though it's not in a great fight island and it's in South Dakota.
Yeah, maybe like Fight Mountain.
Oh no, you can't sell South Dakota. Like it's South Dakota. Like that's it. Just give up.
All right, well, like we said, Fight Island, South Dakota, wherever it is, Yaz Island, Fight Island, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't really matter. It's gonna happen this weekend, and I mean, I think that's it. I mean, anything to look out for, Lucas? Anything like I know you said you're talking Mariah's, any interviews like coming up, anything like that?
Yeah, if you guys check out my YouTube channel, I haven't released everything on the right websites yet, but some stuff is up there, like Santiago Ponzinibbio. We kind of got an update for him, and when I asked him, I was like, what's the update? Why haven't we seen you? I think he went on for like 10 minutes where he's just kind of telling you for 18 months, here's what's been going on to me health-wise. So if you're curious about in detail from his own words what happened, you can watch that interview. Raish is coming up, some good stuff with prospects that are going on the Contender Series. So, just good stuff to look out for as usual.
Yeah. Isn't that the best too? Like when you just like, sometimes you'll just like say hello to a guy and they just like talk and like they do the interview for you. Like that was like, I talked to Julian Rosa last week and I literally just said, I was like, oh, congrats on the fight, thing like that. He went off and like answered, like I had a couple questions in my head. I think he answered like 5 of them in my head and it was just going off the first like 3 minutes. And I was just like, this is great. Like, I was like, I mean, sometimes that's the best thing to do is just kind of like just listen to the guys and just hear them tell their stories.
Well, I'll be honest with Santiago. I was like, all right, it's kind of tough because he's not coming off a fight. He doesn't have a fight coming up, and I don't come up with questions ahead of time. I just kind of let things flow and ask things as I get curious. So I was like, all right, this might be a little bit tough. And then when he gave me 10 minutes just telling me all that happened, I was like, all right. I mean, literally, if anything, I didn't have enough time because I'm not trying to keep guys for 40 minutes either. So I was like, if anything, I didn't have enough time to sort of figure out, all right, shit, I still got some things I need to ask you though.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's so funny too. Like, I'll bring up Barroso again, but that was like the same thing too. I remember that interview ran a little longer than I normally have interviews, but
Yeah.
I was like, we're getting good content here. He's a great guy. I was like,
Yeah.
we'll hang. But yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much it. Anything you want to say before we head out of here?
Yeah, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Grandsire MMA, Instagram as well. Please don't hit my DMs with like weird requests. I have a bunch of people always asking me about a bunch of, how do I get Sean O'Malley and stuff. So don't do that, but do follow me. Subscribe on YouTube and stay tuned for episode 4 of the show. And we thank you guys for watching.
Yeah, and now that we're thanking people, thank you, Michael Stets, for joining us. I mean, like we said, another great guest to the list that we're kind of stacking up here. Yeah, next week's guest, I mean, I think we're working on it. And then also social media, guys, Deep Water MMA Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. And then Twitter is at MMA_deep. And my personal Twitter at cnorthrup732. If you want to follow there and follow along with some of the stories that we're putting out. Yeah, thanks to Miami News for kind of helping us along with this journey. I mean, we're 3 episodes in, which is kind of crazy. Well, almost 3 episodes done now, I guess. But
Yeah.
And a big thanks to Eric Howell as well. I know Mike Heck said not to thank him, but I'm going to stick to tradition. I'm going to keep thanking Eric. And, yeah, that's the show, guys. Enjoy, I mean, a great MMA weekend. UFC 251, we're going to have a lot to discuss, I'm sure, next week, depending on everything that happens. And, Lucas, enjoy your weekend. And thanks, guys, for listening. We'll see you next week.